If you felt confident before the holidays and smaller after, that wasn't random. You didn't lose momentum. You didn't suddenly forget who you are. Your identity was compressed. When you step back into old environments, your brain doesn't pause to assess your current reality. It doesn't check your skills, your growth, your independence. It retrieves a file, an older version of you, the one that learned how to fit inside that space. Old roles come online automatically. The responsible one, the quiet one, the one who doesn't take up too much room, the one who stays legible to the people around them. And this is where most people misread what's happening. Nothing dramatic has to go wrong. No one needs to criticize you. No one needs to put you down. The room can be friendly. The conversations can be harmless. But your body already knows the rules. You speak with less force. You hedge your opinions. Your sense of authority thins out. You don't notice it in the moment because it feels familiar, normal, safe. It's only after you leave that the difference becomes obvious. You get home and feel strangely muted, less decisive, like your edges have been sanded down. Your thoughts don't move as fast, your confidence doesn't rebound on command, because what followed you back wasn't a mood, it was a state, an identity configuration your nervous system still thinks is necessary. This is called context-dependent identity, and until it fully powers down, you're walking around as a smaller version of yourself without realizing you're doing it. This isn't about family dynamics in the way people usually mean it. It's not about who said what or who meant well. It's about how your brain learned to survive those environments before you had language for it. Early on, you learned who you were allowed to be in that system, who got approval, who got corrected, who got overlooked. Those lessons weren't explained, they were absorbed. Your nervous system tracked tone shifts, pauses, facial reactions. It learned which version of you kept things smooth and which one created friction. So you adapted without realizing you were adapting. You became readable, predictable, easy to categorize. And here's the part people don't like hearing. That version of you wasn't a mistake. It worked. It kept you connected. It kept you safe. And because it worked, your brain stored it as a reliable pattern. When you grew up, that pattern didn't disappear. It went quiet, dormant, waiting. And when you walk back into the same rooms, hear the same voices, sit in the same positions around the table, your brain doesn't register past. It registers known. So it reassigns you to the role that once worked.
Automatically, without asking if it still fits. That's why the shift feels involuntary. You're not choosing to be smaller. Your system is choosing familiarity over accuracy. Control used to be necessary there. Restraint used to keep things stable. And even though you don't need those strategies now, your nervous system still runs them because it hasn't been told the threat expired. That's the miscalculation. So you don't feel attacked. You feel contained, reduced but calm, smaller but acceptable. And the more familiar the environment, the stronger the pull. Here's the part most people completely miss. This isn't a thought pattern you picked up later. It's a nervous system reflex that was trained early. When you re-enter those environments, your body shifts before your mind can object. Your posture tightens without you noticing. Your voice loses some range. Your gestures get smaller. Your timing changes. That's not insecurity. That's regulation. Your nervous system is adjusting output to match what once kept you safe. It learned that visibility in those spaces carried consequences, conflict, correction, emotional withdrawal, so it learned to preemptively reduce you. Less expression, less authority, less unpredictability. And because this process happens below awareness, it doesn't feel like fear. It feels like realism, like you're being appropriate, like you're being yourself. This is where it gets dangerous, because it isn't your current self. It's a version calibrated for an older threat landscape. That's why you can't logic your way out of it in the moment. The system running this doesn't respond to insight. It responds to familiarity. Predictability equals safety. Expansion equals uncertainty. So your body chooses the configuration that once worked, even if it no longer fits your life, even if it contradicts who you've become elsewhere. The nervous system doesn't track growth the way your mind does. It tracks patterns. And when a familiar pattern shows up, it responds automatically, shrinking you just enough to keep the environment stable, even if that stability costs you your sense of size afterward. This is where the real tension lives. There are two versions of you active at the same time, and they don't agree. One version knows who you are now, what you're capable of, how you operate in rooms where your identity isn't preloaded for you. The other version is loyal to an older contract, the one that learned how to stay acceptable by staying contained. That version isn't weak, it's trained. It remembers that expanding too much once created consequences. So when you're back in those environments, it takes over quietly. It doesn't announce itself as fear. It presents itself as maturity, as restraint, as knowing your place. And this is the trap, because the conflict doesn't feel dramatic. It feels reasonable. You don't think you're being reduced. You think this just isn't the place.
You postpone your full self. You tell yourself you'll feel normal again later, but later doesn't come immediately because part of you is still loyal to an identity that kept the system stable. That loyalty runs deeper than ambition, deeper than logic. It's a loyalty to belonging, and your nervous system will protect belonging long after it stops protecting growth. This is where the process stops feeling personal and starts feeling mechanical. Multiple systems stack at once. Context-dependent identity loads first, then loss aversion locks in. The potential emotional loss of disrupting the system outweighs any gain from showing up fully. Present bias reinforces it. The immediate relief of staying small feels safer than the delayed discomfort of re-expanding later. Guilt doesn't need to be loud here. It works quietly, signaling that expansion would violate an unspoken rule. Over time, the neural pathway strengthens. Familiar place, automatic contraction. Social calm, internal relief. The loop completes itself, and money becomes collateral damage. When your identity contracts, your sense of agency contracts with it. You don't just feel smaller socially, you feel less financially capable, less decisive, less entitled to move forward. This is money dysmorphia in motion, not because your circumstances changed, but because the version of you doing the assessment is operating from a reduced identity state. And because it's embodied, it feels accurate, like clarity, like realism. And once this pattern runs a few times, it stops feeling temporary. The contraction leaks into the rest of your life. You hesitate where you didn't before. You second-guess decisions that used to feel obvious. You feel subtly cautious about money, visibility, risk. Not enough to alarm you, just enough to stall momentum. And because nothing bad happened, you don't question it. You call it insight, you call it maturity. That mislabeling is what hardens the pattern. The nervous system loves efficiency. If shrinking once reduced friction, it will reuse that solution. Each time you accept the smaller version of yourself as appropriate, the ceiling tightens. Eventually, the system anticipates the environment before you even return. Just thinking about being seen again is enough to compress you. And then it escalates. You start organizing your future around avoiding identity conflict. You aim for outcomes that won't require you to outgrow the role. You design success that fits inside the old frame because your nervous system is calculating the emotional cost of returning changed. The ceiling doesn't announce itself as fear. It presents itself as sustainability, as balance, as knowing your limits. And this is the part that's hardest to sit with. If your identity shrinks automatically around certain people, if that smaller version lingers after you leave, if it quietly reshapes your confidence and your future decisions, then the issue isn't what those environments do to you. It's what they still have permission to activate. Because every time you feel smaller afterward, that's not nostalgia. It's not sensitivity. It's a system reminding you which version of yourself it still recognizes as acceptable. And until you see that clearly, you'll keep mistaking contraction for insight and calling it realism, never realizing the version of you making those judgments isn't the one who actually lives your life anymore.